Pokemon is secretly the most genius JRPG ever devised, and I don't think that gets talked about. Ever. This comes from a place of love, maybe nostalgia, but still. I can think of games that have better writing, stuff of legends like Final Fantasy Tactics or Unicorn Overlord, stuff that really sticks with you later in life like Final Fantasy VI or Unicorn Overlord, or even stuff that you just pick up again and realize exactly why you liked it in the first place, like Dark Cloud and Unicorn Overlord. Have you ever thought about how a Pokemon game is built? From what the gym leaders would be to how you'd shape up your rival and the evil team? It's fun to sit down with your friends and really go into what kind of thing you do with a series as widely accessible as Pokemon, and people definitely have. There's no shortage of ROM hacks out there that prove this. Pokemon regions have a lot of things going on within them. You always see people talking about recycling from other parts in the series, but it's important to see when and where things are reused and why, and especially the how. Because of this, I've made it my personal mission to track and discuss all what goes into making a Pokemon game from a grand scheme standpoint. Hi, my name is Sonata, and I'm an insane person, and you're watching this video after you just got back to your room with a sandwich. In the last episode of the Space Show, I analyzed the makeup of every single region and distilled what exactly the most common occurrences are based on certain checkpoints that Pokemon has offered. Mainly, the gym leaders, the Elite Four, and the champion. These are the most unique boss fights that Pokemon offers as a JRPG, I've found. After some back and forth with some friends of mine, who I called experts for their contributions, I decided to split the topic into two videos, this second one covering just about everything I didn't cover in the last one. You don't have to watch that one to understand this one, but I'd really like it if you did because nobody did. With the raw data in my hands, I collected my experts to join me in creating Pokemon teams based on nothing more than the data I found. I took on the role of the champion and crafted the narrative around the most statistically average read of a Pokemon game and the various ways it can express itself within the narrow confines of certain specializations. I created a situation in which there were some hard and fast rules, but we still had to find ways around and craft a theoretically average Pokemon game. Don't look at the fact that one of my gym leaders in that video decided to hit the proverbial player in this game with a steel chair should he have been a 7th or 8th gym leader. Ursaluna scares me.
Oh! You gotta get big, Meg!
Regardless, I'm sure you guys want to know something. Why didn't I do this all in the first video? Well, to tell you the truth, it was supposed to be. I was originally going to do that rug pull of
But wait! There's more!
like twice in the video, you dig? And the team building was actually supposed to be its own separate video, but Robin fought me on that. The same guy who pushed back on my questions in the first place, the same person who screwed my head on my shoulders and told me that the gotcha moment should be talking about the teams, not that there was more to the video. There being more should be the hook to a second video, the one you're watching right now. The other major reason is that video was supposed to come out in February, and this one in March around my birthday. And then it got wildly out of control and I ended up spending 2 months straight on it rather than the 3 to 4 weeks it normally takes for an episode of the Space Show to drop. Funny how that happens, ain't it? In this episode, I want to talk about how Pokemon games in general shape up and what their most common occurrences are because I find that utterly fascinating, and in the end, I'm going to show you exactly how the perfect Pokemon game is going to go. I'm going to be making a timeline. Each major event is going to be placed on the timeline. Every gym, every rival fight, every evil team encounter. It should be noted that due to games like Black and White or Sword and Shield, the champion fight isn't necessarily always last, though it's usually last. The legendary encounter is also going to be placed on the timeline since I do believe that that's important to how Pokemon games pan out in the grand scheme of things. The point is, I'm way in over my head again and I can't just sit here and keep going on and on about what's in this video and what went into it, and maybe I should just stop being a doomer about my last video utterly flopping into the fucking dust and I should just start somewhere, so I'm starting with the rival fights because you just gotta go sometimes! There are a total of 171 individual different rival fights across 9 generations of Pokemon, meaning that there are an average of 19 rival encounters in every game, which, I'm sure you understand, makes no sense at all. Even in games with multiple rivals, the only game that comes close to that number is Sword and Shield, and that's only because Hop has 10 rival battles. This is due to variability in the trainer fights throughout the series. Every instance of a fight being different, if I could find a difference, is here. The only thing I didn't count in this was if the only real change was the starter Pokemon, especially if they were monotype. Blue kind of throws a wrench into this, and if I could get into how every rival battle shakes up, I would, and maybe I might if this video does well, but that's not here or there. The point is that every meaningful change to the fight through team composition has been accounted for. This means that across Blue's 7 fights, he actually has 21 different variants due to Bulbasaur and Charizard. Bulbasaur comes pre-equipped with the Poison type, and any team that lacks Bulbasaur has an extra Psychic type in Execute and Executor. This doesn't play into the other part of how I'm talking about these rival fights, since their regular amount of battles in any one playthrough are more important to the overall timeline rather than the amount of variations they have. Like in my list, Silver only gets 6 fights but Blue has 21? Stop the bullshit. This does beg the question, what's the weirdest reason for a fight discrepancy? It actually comes from Pokemon Emerald. Yeah, specifically Emerald. Depending on the player's choice of character, your rival will end up being either Brendan or May. During the second, optional fight, one that only happens should the player not use the Rustboro City Pokemon Center and whites out after rescuing Pico, should the player be in possession of Torchic as their starter, May will have a Torkoal, Brendan has a Slugma. Ah yes, the two genders. Brendan and May really are super emblematic of how teams really change depending on, yes, the gender, but even the starter. Sure, Blue does that too, but holy fuck May and Brendan. The thing is, this kind of thing doesn't really return, like, at all. Starter-based teams, sure, but there isn't a lot of gender differences, if at all. Maybe because the last time the series played with the idea of the character you don't choose at the beginning of the game becoming your rival was with Pokemon X and Y, and even then they're basically the same person. The only difference they get is that they get an evolution based on your starter, but that's only the Generation 1 evolutions. The next time there's a major enough non-starter difference is actually only in Hop's final fight, and that's dependent on the literal game you're playing since he's rocking either Zacian or Zamazenta. It's Zacian. Fuck, why did I think it was Zacian? I've been over this. And that's dependent on the literal game you're playing since he's rocking either Zacian or Zamazenta. So the thing I said at the beginning about how there's an average of 19 rival fights per game, yeah, that's not what I'm putting on the timeline, I promise. The more accurate thing to do would be to count how many fights each individual labeled rival gets and average them. Across the 22 characters who I considered to be your rivals across the series, which does include Arven and Penny by the way, since being your friend counts, the average amount of encounters you have with your rival is a much more manageable 4.45 repeating. But okay, according to Bulbapedia, Penny doesn't count, so we can remove her fight, which gives us 4.6 average encounters. But that doesn't feel right? By the way, I should mention, this doesn't account for however many times you encounter your rival, period. This is just the one-on-one battles that the rival has. If I included every encounter, battle or not, I think we'd be here all day. For the sake of being thorough, I went ahead and calculated the average based on your main rival encounters. The person you encounter most, probably at the beginning of the game, that has the starter with a type advantage over yours. In that case, I have to throw out Hau, Hop, and Nemona. So what I'm really doing is just including the character who might be considered your main rival. Period. In that case, our average is actually 6.4. In terms of main rival encounters, that's good? The only outlier really is just Hop with his whopping 10 battles, but even then, between 6 and 7 encounters just feels the most right for me, and it comes from an actual data point. Yay! The amount of rivals you have per game is something I want to consider here, so again, let's exclude Penny and see what we've got, because that 4.6 number is really interesting to me. The average amount of rivals is actually exactly 2. So what if we did this? With an average rival count of 2, with a main rival count average of 6.4, and an average overall rival encounter rate of 4.6, excluding Penny from the number again, what if we combined these? What if in our hypothetical Pokemon timeline and Pokemon game in specific, we had 2 rivals? Again, one with type advantage and one with type disadvantage. Or do what some other games do and give them type disadvantage while someone else entirely gets the other starter blah blah blah. The encounter rate for the main rival should be 6, rounding down from 6.4, and the sub-rival could either be 4 or 5 depending on how we're feeling. I'm leaning on 5 personally, rounding up from 4.6. This says nothing about their team composition, but I feel like that's pretty obvious by now. The rival is going to have the starter, a normal type, an off-the-wall pick to incentivize you to branch out, possibly a Pokemon you can't have without trading. Don't forget a Pokemon they just genuinely like, and that's most of what they've got. Their other pickings are more than likely to be in line with that last thing. Like, I don't think Nemona chose Rockruff or Goomy or Orthworm because they're good. I think she chose them because she thinks Goomy and Rockruff are cute, and that Orthworm looks like a fucking idiot. It's the same idea with Cynthia having a Gastrodon on her team. Like, yeah, I know Gastrodon is a good Pokemon, but Cynthia didn't pick it for it being good. She picked it because she has a life-size Gastrodon plush back in her house, and she sits on it in her comfy clothes when she doesn't have anything to do that day. Fan artists, get to work. Now's the point where I get to the evil team encounters, and let me tell you, this one's a lot more complicated to think about. Evil team encounters happen all the time, but there's three kinds: grunts, admins, and leaders. I shudder to think about how many times you averagely encounter these teams, because Team Rocket has about like 40 grunt fights. In Generation 1, that number might actually be closer to like 34, but I'm not going to count every individual Team Rocket fight in the games, because at least in Generation 1, there's only two categories, that being Grunt and Giovanni. In that sense, I've got to make a decision, and that's going to be based on location rather than individual fights, though leaders and admins are going to be separate on this list. This means that every encounter in the Rocket hideout is just going to count as one meeting with the grunts. I'm also going with Emerald for the Gen 3 games. Sorry, not sorry, but I don't want this process to take me another 2 months. Hey, future me, how long did this take? Shit, okay. So, in this part of the video, I had to go slightly insane in order to get my numbers, and that started with the first generation. I should mention that I don't give a shit about the Sevi Isles, which might be controversial since there's genuinely an integral part of Fire Red and Leaf Green, but adding that in would kind of make this harder on myself. In looking to get averages, I had to ask myself a very important question. What do I do with the scientist characters? In Generation 1, 2, and 6, there are scientists with that specific trainer class in the games that are part of the villain organizations. Sometimes they appear alongside executives or admins, and I had to weigh up whether or not to condense them for my numbers. This is something I did, so that means that X and Y had a massive admin encounter count of 11, since the scientists are named and might as well be admins in the game, despite ostensibly being higher on the totem pole. I also had to leave out some characters who I think fit in the storylines, like Gladion for Team Skull since he's counted as a rival, and Pierce and Marnie for Team Yell since they're just gym trainers at the end of the day, and because of that, Pierce is their de facto leader. Despite that, from what I understand, he's never met and fought as the leader of Team Yell, just as the gym leader for Spike Myth. It's why I have to leave out Plumeria's and Guzma's final fights, since they stop being agents of Team Skull and gain the trainer class of Pokemon Trainer. That all being said, here are the numbers. The average amount of grunt encounters is 7.83. This number is insane to me because it's a bit over how many encounters are in just the first game, which has 7. Keep in mind, we're condensing maybe 36-ish grunts into that many encounters, and that's just taking the actual amount of grunts from Pokemon Red and Blue. If you're wondering how I'm going to talk about how many grunts are in a game on average, it's somewhere between 25 and 40, because I love you guys, but my brain is already glazed over from the amount of numbers this entire project is putting me through. It's fantastic. Where things get really funny is when we get to admins because, like I said, I combined nameless scientists into the count when it came to the first 2 generations, and X and Y. The funny part actually happened when I had to start throwing Generation 2 in the mix, and the reason it's funny is because of how things changed during the leap to Gen 4 mechanics. In the original, a few of the executives were just that, executives. Nameless at the time, but still acting as important pillars of Team Rocket. I could go on, but that's besides the point. When Gold, Silver, and Crystal became Heart Gold and Soul Silver, the feminine executive became Ariana, and a bunch of other executives, and even grunts, get their roles condensed into named characters who are more recognizable as members of Team Rocket. I used Heart Gold, Soul Silver as the basis for this number, but it's still interesting nonetheless how some trainers had their roles and designs expanded. The really fuck-ass part is with X and Y, and holy shit did I go through a journey with Assistant Altaria. They got a promotion literally just for this, and now I pay them in Burger King Bacon Kings. Or Culver's, it depends on the day. The reason this was fuck-ass was because of one character, Malva. Her whole thing is that she's secretly a member of Team Flare, and in hindsight, it's kind of obvious, but we couldn't figure out where exactly it's said that she's there. It turns out she just heavily implies that that's the case due to dialogue that I'm sure a lot of players haven't seen. It's in the post-game when she's personally helping you take out Xerosic, and she has info that only a Team Flare admin would have, so my assistant said that it's pertinent to add her fight into the admin category. This also brings up something that Team Flare did that no other game did, which is to make admins a separate character type entirely. God, X and Y, oh god, I'm getting mad again. I'm actually getting mad. I'm actually getting mad at this because it fucked up my whole fucking week after I did this research. Oh god, save me. He can't save me now. It's kind of like how in Generation 2 there were the executives and the scientists, except the admins are totally nameless and the scientists are named characters that you fight multiple times, as if they were admins such as Mars, Saturn, and Jupiter from Team Galactic. This caused us to look into the entire script of Pokemon X and Y, and I do mean the literal entire script, from every text file in the game to see where Malva talks about any of this, and it was an incredible bonding experience. 10 out of 10. totally would recommend you gather a close friend and read through the fuck-ass parts of Pokemon games together. That being said, here's the numbers. The average amount of admin encounters is sitting at a solid 5.4. Keep in mind, if we discount Malva, as she's actually a part of the Elite Four and blah blah blah, this number only drops to 5.3, which is incredibly slight. The only reason the average isn't impacted as much as it could be is because Team Yell doesn't have any admins, and believe it or not, you only fight Grunts and Getsus as part of Team Plasma. No admins or sages in sight. You might count N, but he's definitively your third rival in that game. The amount of times you fight bosses on average sits at 2.3. I wish I had more to say about this, but it's really straightforward. The fun thing here is that Pierce doesn't count at all, but even if he did, that actually bumps the average down very slightly to 2.25, which is hilarious to me. I should mention that both the Aether Foundation and Macrocosmos were included in these, mostly because they both play into the idea that they're the real bad guys of the situation the game takes place in, and I think that that's important to the stories that these games tell. I'm not going to do an average amount of evil teams per game because that feels not important to the thing that I'm doing, so my timeline is only going to account for one villainous organization, yeah? So here's what we've got. Let's say the amount of times you encounter Grunts, whether they be in small or big groups like at hideouts or something, is going to be 8. Admin encounters are sitting at 5 and boss battles at 2. I like this a lot. It feels whole. I feel like team composition is kind of a non-issue here, since in most of the games, the evil team's Grunts are all using the same kinds of Pokemon. Pokemon that are really easy to catch in mass droves to essentially be given out like standard issue equipment. Like, every Spartan in Halo knows how to use the basic-ass assault rifle, and that's why they basically always have it until they pick up the Halo 2 battle rifle and wreck house. The next part of this video doesn't have numbers tied to it, it's just the types again, and whoo baby, let's see what we've got going on. It's time for the Legendary, and to be honest, the amount of times that a Legendary features in a game cannot be quantized down to the average amounts of appearances, and that makes me sad. There's not an instance where you battle a Legendary Pokemon multiple times, and that's how you create checkpoints of important moments. This isn't the evil team, where the fact that you're battling means that the storylines stop running parallel to each other and cross over into each other as unsubtly as a bus through a parking garage. Or Unicorn Overlord mentioned 15 minutes into the video. I mentioned at the end of the last video that I went ahead and calculated the most likely to exist Legendary by using every category of special that Pokemon has given us. That comes with 4 classifications, that being Legendary, Mythical, Ultra Beast, and Paradox Pokemon. For a lot of reasons, I don't think that Legendary and Mythical have any difference between them. Not in stats, not in status, not in how you can get them. Like, take Shaman, for example, the only Pokemon where I look at it and go, mythical Pokemon, and I can't even give you a solid reason for that. That's just the only time that I, personally, see even a hint of a difference. Apparently, according to Bulbapedia, they're related but have a distinct difference. Usually meaning that they're obtained through special means. As of Generation 6, there are normal means in the games to get them as well, but that still begs the question on what the actual difference is. You can make the argument that Ultra Beasts aren't Pokemon, but they still show up in the Pokedex just as easily as other actual Pokemon do. It's not like your Pokedex had to be upgraded to specifically handle them being in there, because who the fuck would have given that to you? Lusamine? Fat chance. I think that Paradox Pokemon can be combed into regular Pokemon since they are just Pokemon, but from different eras, that either being the ancient past or the distant future. I still kept them in because, I don't know, I just wanted to take the classifications and put them together. In that vein, the most common type for a legendary Pokemon to be is Psychic. And if you're wondering what would happen if I actually only meant legendary Pokemon, then it would still be Psychic by an absolute landslide, landing at 15 Pokemon with Psychic as their main type. Still keeping with every special Pokemon being in this list, the most likely subtype is actually Flying, which makes me want to say that the most likely to exist legendary Pokemon, or Mythical, or Ultra Beast, or Paradox, or what the fuck ever, would be a Flying Psychic type. Does that already exist, though? The answer is yes, it's Lugia, who is a legendary Pokemon. Ooh! Wow, that tastes so much better. What the fuck? Okay, but that's annoying, so let's break down what the actual most common legendary Pokemon is, taking out Mythicals and Ultra Beasts and Paradoxes. In doing that, still the most common legendary Pokemon is a Psychic Flying type. I was expecting that subtype to drop, but it's insane. The most represented type overall is still Psychic, and I think in part that's due to box legends for Sun and Moon. Cosmog, Cosmoem, Solgaleo, Lunala, and Necrozma are all Psychic type, and they contribute a lot. In taking out every other kind of Pokemon, I think it comes to being that there isn't a single bug legendary in any game so far, and I think that's a crime. Now, up until this point, it's been about where the event is placed and how common that these events could be, but there's something that bugs me personally about how these games are laid out, and I guess this can lead right into making the timeline. Out of the 9 generations of Pokemon, 3 of them place the legendary Pokemon right between Gym 7 and Gym 8. In Generation 1, you couldn't even get Mewtwo without first becoming League Champion, placing the legendary at the end of the timeline as an optional bonus. My favorite place to put the legendary on the timeline is actually right at the end, which, if I'm to understand correctly, is something that both Black and White and Sword and Shield do. In Black and White, your main interaction with the legendary Pokemon is to catch it right at the end after you've fought the Elite Four, and this ties into the Evil Team boss battles as well. To put things briefly, I think it's poetic to do it this way since, in most cases, the legendary Pokemon and the evil team are intrinsically linked together. They do the same sort of thing in Sword and Shield with Rose trying to get an infinite power source and the stuff with Eternatus and Zacian and Zamazenta kind of happening right before the champion fight, rather than before the 8th gym battle. I know that Sword and Shield's Pokemon tournament is very much lacking in Elite Four, taking on a national tournament with qualifying rounds as basis for the gym challenge, blah blah blah. The thing I think is the most accurate to the timeline of Pokemon games is to have the legendary be somewhere near the end. My personal preference is, generally speaking, right before becoming the champion, because I think that it's thematically cool to carry around the Pokemon on the box into the final main fight. Pokemon Black and White are the GOATs in this situation, and no, I will not shut up about it. So this leads me to the real ambiguous part of the project. I want to create a timeline of this statistical nightmare that the Pokemon games have put in front of me, to chart out where every rival fight, Pokemon League, Evil Team encounter, and legendary Pokemon go. In order to do this, I must take these data points from every other Pokemon game and chart them out to truly understand how all of this comes together. So I did that. Welcome to Victory Road. This is a new series I'm starting on this channel, which is very much inspired and arguably stolen from Game Maker's Toolkit, which was a huge inspiration for this channel when talking about games and their designs. Mark's video series, Boss Keys, was the main inspiration for this, especially in the making of these timelines. In this video, I am making a timeline of events based on how everything else shakes out, taking the data from my last video and this one to make the quote-unquote perfect Pokemon game. The data is, of course, to generalize when and where and why certain things happen in the other 10 Pokemon games and how this stuff comes together. It turns out I actually kind of already did this for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet when I went and found out the supposed true order for events in that game to happen based on their levels, so part of my job there is already done. I just have to do the same thing for every other game in the series. Of course, like I mentioned, this first video is really just about my personal Pokemon game that I've been theory crafting here for the past 2 hours if you include my last video on the subject. The second video will be Generation 1, so on and so forth. I do hope you guys will keep watching and are excited to see how the series shakes out, because I'm excited to really get into this stuff. That all being said, I have to do the bulk of the work right now, just for this video, so let's get started. But before that, I would really love it if y'all would hit that big ol' subscribe button down below. If you think you're subscribed, maybe go and double check. It really helps more than you know. I really want to hit 3,000 subscribers by June, and it would mean the world to me if you guys stuck around, especially if you like what you see. I'd also love it if you commented on the video, engage with it in any way. Tell you what, put State Fair Corn Dog somewhere in your comment if you got this far. Really confused people expecting me to talk about Panda Express again. I work really hard on these things, and I'd love to know what you guys thought. Anyway, back to the video. For my timeline, I didn't want to add in every single event, like when you go through cities as opposed to stopping at them for something major. I didn't use Diamond and Pearl for the Generation 4 timeline, but it should be noted that you don't really stop in Hearthome City to take on the gym, since in those games, it's penned as Gem 5. Gem 5? It's penned as Gym 5, but in Platinum, it's Gym 3 to keep the pace. The first thing I'm going to do is put all the gyms, the Elite Four, and Champion into place, because everything else kind of falls into place around that. One of the universal constants, and I do mean universal, is the prevalence of the first major event being a rival battle. I can't even say that it's the main rival, because in a few cases, notably Generations 5 and 6, your first rival fight is actually the sub-rival. I think in my case I'm going to do the main rival first, and the sub-rival second. In a few cases, you fight your rivals multiple times before the first gym. I think that's fine in some games, but I'm going to avoid that personally. So then comes the first gym. Then, usually there's the first meeting with their evil team. Sometimes there's a second real evil team, but I'm just going to leave it at just one. I'm actually going to put a second villain grunt encounter here since it could be a second location, which is how I've classified things, but it's vague for a reason. You're supposed to fill in the blanks. It's at this point I'm going to fill in things up to the 7th gym, which is where I have to make decisions. Ones I don't really like that I'm making, but I have to anyway. The main thing is how I want to fill out the end of the game. I can't really move the Elite Four and the Champion unless I want to pull a black and white where you technically have to beat the Elite Four twice in order to become Champion, but I don't actually want to do that. I do want to have the final rival fight be right before the Elite Four, whether that's pre-Victory Road like Emerald Wally or right before the Elite Four like Silver. That's up to how you want to see it since Victory Road as a location isn't listed. 4 out of the 10 games used for research for both of the videos so far have an explicit resolution to the evil team's storyline and an encounter with the box legendary for the purposes of continuing the story or to catch it and make it your best friend, between the 7th and 8th gym. I very much don't want to do that. It has always felt like an anticlimax if you essentially get a badge of how cool you are before you actually get the badge of how cool you are. That's why I'm going to place the last grunt fight, the last 2 admin fights, and the second boss fight right here after the 8th gym, with the rival fight after that, and then you know the vibes. I'm actually going to take the first boss fight and place it right here after the 6th gym. There's no precedent for this, but I feel like aggregating the data on games with multiple boss fights puts it about here. In fact, in Crystal version, there actually is a Team Rocket fight right there before Price. There's one thing I'm trying to think about though, and that's where the legendary Pokemon should be in all of this. In most games, the legendary or hell, the legendaries you encounter are generally tied to dealing with the evil team. I don't even think I can say generally because it happens in most games. Crystal version has you explicitly able to take on the box legend after you defeat Team Rocket since they give you the item you need to fight Suicune. Emerald is explicitly about summoning Kyogre and Groudon through whatever the hell Team Aqua and Magma want to do, and if I'm not already on my knees recreationally for Black and White, then what the hell am I doing? So that begs the question, am I going to follow in their footsteps? As much as I don't want to, I kind of have to. My main complaint is if this stuff happens between gyms 7 and 8, but considering I moved the evil team to happen after the 8th gym but before the Elite Four, I think it makes perfect sense for the legendary to slot in right before the boss.
I like that.
And so, here's my timeline for this hypothetical most likely to exist Pokemon game. I do genuinely think that this is fascinating that I'm even able to theorize something like this. I mean, many people do. There's a reason why fan games and ROM hacks exist in the first place. I've always been more intrigued by Pokemon as a narrative experience rather than a gameplay one, and the fact that almost every event can be distilled like this into averages shows that they have a formula that works. I think being predictable is a good thing for something as formulaic and simple as Pokemon. The thing that I assume people love the most isn't the actual story, it's elements within it. I like seeing it as a whole, which is why I say narrative. The narrative doesn't mean the actual story, at least in this case. The narrative is how you, the player, express yourself through the different conflicts that arise. How you tackle certain things, and when the game asks you to tackle them, you have to change your strategies most of the time unless it's Generation 1 and you horn drill everything with Nidoking because I know you've done it at least once before. If you haven't, you're missing out. At least do it once, it's kind of funny. It's part of why I've been so vague in this video about the concrete things you do, like even how many grunts are in a certain encounter, because it could be as little as 1 or as many as 10. That's a lot to keep track of. That's a lot for any developer to keep track of. Even in the most fondly remembered games of my age group, I don't think people remember broadly how many grunts they fought or how much of an impact that a specific admin had on them. I'd like to think they remember the characters and how the world was shaped around them. It's partially why I think characters like Cynthia have such an impact, because even in Platinum where she has a more important role, she only shows up like 4 times, with her champion fight being one of them. People remember the broad strokes. People attach to them in a way I don't think they do for any other JRPG out there. I can't think of another one that I've played, or ones that others have told me about, where the major details are just as important as the things that happen in between them. I think Pokemon's structure as a game where you have hundreds of options for party members and you have to pick 6 leads to a lot of people asking themselves when and where they want to have these checkpoints. And maybe, just maybe, most definitely, I'm talking out of my ass. I mean, I'm a Kingdom Hearts fan, but even in that experience, I'm not saying stuff like, I wish I could do this Disney World here, and it was this Disney World, and leaving it at that because the broad strokes of Kingdom Hearts aren't nearly as important as the things between them. The most important moments from exploring Disney Worlds are how the characters react to them, and what it says about them as people and how that shapes their universe. It's not about a tournament where you go to Beauty and the Beast land and pick up a coin that tells you that you did the thing, now do it 8 more times. The reason why Pokemon has a story that lasts with us isn't because it is art, or that it doesn't have a message, or that it's just a nostalgic piece of our childhood. In the pursuit of giving the players an experience that lasts, they created a system where people of all ages can express themselves with 6 Pokemon, 8 gyms, a friend who you rival with, and a bad guy, and ask them what they would do if they were in any one of these people and what would happen. It's within this that they create art, they create a message, and they create a nostalgic piece of anyone's childhood. And that's the secret. And this was mine. If you guys have any questions as to why I did things like this, I'd love to hear what you think down in the comments. I feel like the actual hardest part of making this timeline was filling in the in-between of the first grunt fight after Gym 1 all the way up to Gym 8. There was a precedent for it, but I knew I wanted to have the evil team's defeat be after the 8th gym because that has and always will feel more right to me than anything else. Hell, even in a game with open structure like Scarlet and Violet, 2 of the team's star bases are penned after the 8th gym based purely on the levels their teams are at. Then again, in that game, the dedicated legendary encounter is also the last thing you really do in that game, and I will never get over how good it was. Scarlet and Violet are fantastic games, by the way. I really hope you guys liked this project. I definitely had fun making it. There's gonna be more Victory Road soon. I just want to do something else first.
I'm tired of thinking about Pokemon!
Maybe sometime later in the year we can get it started properly, especially since I have a lot of footage gathering to do, but we'll burn that bridge when we get there. I definitely won't have a mental breakdown halfway through these next videos happening, so I look forward to making them. And I hope you look forward to seeing them. With all of that said, my name is Sonata. Thank you for watching.